How did they build something like that?
These people knew that these events were so catastrophic they could wipe out their entire civilization. So they created the most elaborate group of underground cities in the world, creating air shafts, areas to even bring animals down, areas for sleeping, areas for schools. They carved the entire thing by hand.
You already know what it is. It's your boy Laid Back with another reaction, another review, another episode. Hey, TikTok, you up to bat? Wow. It's your boy Laid Back. Welcome back to my channel. Hey, two things we gotta do. You gotta hit that subscribe button. I'm drinking this water. You already know what it is, man. Think rich in 2026. Think rich in 2026. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the notification bell. Stay up to date with all the videos. We back with another one, man. Hey, before we get into this, make sure you tap into my TikTok, man. We got a lot of cool stuff going on over there. Music, panels, live trash or pass. Make sure you tap in. But we back with another one, man. We got lost civilizations, man. This is gonna be interesting. So you make it to the end of this one, you a real one for real, man. Make sure you put that in the comments. Also, don't forget, I got a TikTok playlist. If you into this stuff, you can binge watch. But hey, proceed with caution. But let's go ahead and get into it. Fire Squad, what's popping? Let's get it.
There are some parts of this world that just seem like they were built to swallow would-be European explorers. Pull up a chair and let's talk about Percy Fawcett and the lost city of Zed. Percy Harrison Fawcett was born in 1867 in Devon, England. In 1906, he was hired by the Royal Geographical Society in Britain to settle a land debate between Bolivia and Brazil over the border of the Mato Grosso. Now the third largest state in Brazil, covers about 348,800 square miles, making it about big enough to swallow the entire state of Texas with room to spare.
Wow.
The region covers dense jungle, thousands of miles of the Amazonian River Basin and its many tributaries, and incredible natural resources and sites not many people will ever see. For almost 20 years, Fawcett keeps coming back to the region. He would make 7 expeditions between 1906 and 1924, tracing rivers, fixing coordinates, oppressive heat, insects, disease, dead pack animals, dead colleagues. But Fawcett keeps coming back, because somewhere along the way, Percy Fawcett became a believer. While contemplating his maps, Fawcett started gathering stories, indigenous accounts of old stoneworks and causeways, artifacts and earthworks. He builds a hypothesis. There must be an advanced, long-lost city he calls Zed, deep in the interior, far away from the big rivers that previous expeditions had already explored. But like many men of his time, he carries a lot of Eurocentric baggage. It is true that he was less trigger-happy than a lot of his contemporaries, and he did take a little time to learn the indigenous language in the region. That didn't mean that he was their friend. His core question was still framed around Eurocentric ideas of civilization and greatness. Even though he would be dragged back to England several times, including to fight in World War I, he would keep returning to the Amazon over and over again in his obsession to find the lost city of Zed. Because Fawcett fell out so often with other expedition members, on his 7th and final trip, he decided he was going to bring his son, Jack, and his friend Raleigh into the jungle with him this time. In April of 1925, the group sets out from Suiaba into the interior of the Mato Grosso. They move from river steamers to pack animals to traveling on foot, entering territory where indigenous communities, brutalized for decades by rubber barons, have every reason to treat armed outsiders as a threat. At the last major outpost, their guides refuse to go any further. Fawcett sends them back with letters and dispatches, and in a final letter to his wife Nina, he writes, quote, "You need have no fear of failure." And somewhere beyond a place he calls Dead Horse Camp, all 3 men disappear forever. In the following decades, official expeditions, adventurers, and journalists would try to follow the men into the jungle. Some did not come back. And the stories just get wilder and wilder over the decades. That he was cannibalized, that he died of disease or starvation, that he chose to remain and live with a community in the interior, that he was executed after overstepping bounds. While some of these accounts hold more weight than others, fact is, we just don't know. And we have no physical evidence to prove one or the other. But here's the interesting thing. Even though Fawcett was an ethnocentrist who did not have the indigenous communities in the region's best interest at heart, that isn't to say that he was entirely wrong. Recent LiDAR scans like the one you see behind me have revealed massive pre-Columbian settlements with gridded streets, ditches, plazas, and roads. Very clear signs that complex societies did in fact live in this region. So while it is a little bit of a shame that he never lived to see these LiDAR surveys and maps, let's not forget that he carried a deeply Eurocentric obsession into the jungle with him and never came back out.
Do your own research.
Gunung Padang in Indonesia may officially be the oldest pyramid in the world. You know, I'm gonna be honest. I watched Graham Hancock's Netflix series last year where he shows in the very first episode of Gunung Padang and says that this is the oldest pyramid in the world, like way older than the currently established and agreed upon oldest pyramid in the world, which is the stepped pyramid of Djoser in Egypt. We collectively gave him major side eye. I know I did, but apparently he was onto something, or rather this research team was. A new study conducted by the same team who was featured in that Netflix episode published a culmination of their data, which suggests that this previously unremarkable mound may in fact be the site of the oldest pyramid in the world, called Gunung Padang, also known as the Mountain of Light. Archaeologists have long been aware of Gunung Padang's existence, but they just haven't been able to nail down the true age of the monument. In fact, when the lead researcher Akbar and his team began the dig, they were expecting to find out that Gunung Padang was no older than 2,500 years old. Now the study has determined the age to be as old as 27,000 years old. That is 22,000 years before the first Egyptian pyramid was even built.
Wow.
So you can imagine why the archaeology world was hesitant to accept this study, because this will change everything that we know, not just about human civilizations, but how advanced our ancient civilizations actually were. Because at first, Gunung Padang was thought to be this ancient graveyard because of all the volcanic rocks resembling gravestones. But then in 2010, Danny Hillman Nawawijaja, a researcher at the Indonesian Institute of the Sciences, felt that there was more to this mound than meets the eye. He said that the mound didn't match the surrounding topography, which was very much eroded. In contrast, the mound was young, almost artificial, and around the perimeter of the site was a raised wall made up of basalt columnar rocks. Except they weren't standing up, they were purposely laid on their side with mortar in between to hold them in place. The field survey of Gunung Padang started in October of 2011 and went on to October of 2014. It was one of the most extensive and integrated studies conducted on a buried ancient structure, period. Carbon dating analysis indicated that Gunung Padang was likely built during the last ice age in the Paleolithic era. Core drillings in 7 different locations showed that Gunung Padang was built in 4 distinct stages over the course of tens of thousands of years. And these 4 layers appear to be built roughly 1,000 years apart by 4 different builders who were basically picking up where the last builder left off. The team also found evidence of 3 chambers inside that are roughly 10 by 10 by 15 meters. And they're all aligned along the central axis of the structure, but these have yet to be further excavated. They also discovered that the site was purposely buried multiple times, possibly to hide or preserve the monument's purpose. But what is really fascinating is the time period.
Yo, this is crazy.
Archaeologists in Mexico just uncovered a lost Maya city that resisted Spanish rule for over 100 years. This city was known as the Land of the White Jaguar. And after the Spanish took over the Maya capital in 1586, this group of Maya hid in the thick jungles of what is now Chiapas and resisted Spanish rule for 110 years. This city was hidden as a stronghold for resistance. Sadly, the Spanish did eventually locate them and renamed the city as Nuestra Señora de Dolores in 1695. But by 1721, the city vanished from maps and records.
What?
Just last week, this group of archaeologists led by Josué Lozada Toledo found the city. By using modern mapping technology, tracing old colonial records, and following a friar's 400-year-old directions. There, they found artifacts, buildings, and evidence of a community that resisted the Spanish for over a century. Showing how this community lived, adapted, and held on to their traditions deep in the rainforest. This city isn't just an archaeological find, it's proof of indigenous resistance. They resisted for over a century, and now their legacy resists erasure.
That was a good line at the end. I like that.
because archaeologists roll their eyes every time you say the word Atlantis. Plato, which is the earliest surviving reference to Atlantis, that's precisely the date he gives for the destruction of Atlantis. His ancestor Solon visited Egypt, and there Solon claimed to have been told by Egyptian priests about this great advanced civilization that once existed, but that angered the gods and was destroyed in an enormous flood. And Solon asked those Egyptian priests, when did this happen? And they said, 9,000 years ago. And it's exactly the date of what is called Meltwater Pulse 1b, one of the biggest single rises overnight in sea level that ever occurred.
Could be a coincidence, but
What?
pretty good one. There's plenty of evidence that there were many sites like this that were thought to be just legend and myth. Like Troy, for instance.
We should never dismiss myths. We should always listen to them. They're the memory. They're the memory bank of our species, and they may be expressed in symbolic language. There may be wonderful stories built around them, but at the core is factual information. The story of Atlantis is not alone. There are thousands of traditions from all around the world speaking of a global flood that destroyed a former civilization, that brought to an end a golden age. And then the mystery deepens. I think I'm looking at a transfer of technology. I think people came to that site who already knew how to do this stuff, to push them into a new direction, and that was truly the beginnings of civilization as we know it. I think there was an earlier lost civilization.
This is interesting.
Ancient India rewrites history yet again. 1,000-year-old caves have just been inspected by stonemasons and engineers, and what they found is going to freak you out. These are the Barabar caves. There's 5 of them. Carved into solid granite, the polish is so smooth, it's smoother than machine-polished marble and slightly less than industrial glass.
What?
And 20 times smoother than industrial granite. Professional stonemasons were interviewed about recreating this project and how difficult it would be out of 10, and those are their answers. Most said it was impossible. A company called AGP, started by a former stonemason, scanned him with one of these. It's a spinning laser that creates millions of data points that can reconstruct the caves from the inside out with no distortion. Here are the results. The caves have perfect symmetry in the floor, ceiling, and walls. The walls are angled by just a few degrees. Why? Polishing with the aid of gravity is more than doable. That's what we do. Polishing a vertical wall and a curved ceiling, on the other hand, is... The walls have a perfect angle within 0.1 degrees. You can't even tell with your eyes. Why was this necessary? The acoustics of these caves are also ridiculous.
This is crazy.
Granite barely absorbs acoustic waves, and the dome at Sudama resonates at 74.9 hertz. This renders speech unintelligible in the chamber. Reverb is the time it takes a sound to decay into nothing. 60 seconds is the max my production software will go. Inside Notre Dame, it'll reverb for about 10 seconds. Sudama is 62. Vapika is 70. When they were studying the acoustics, they discovered that the angled walls reduced the floating echo. The caves were rediscovered in 1785 by the colonizer dudes. No function of the caves has ever been discovered. The historical foundation is based on this crude hack job into the perfect walls. It says the absolutely perfect caves were used as a rain shelter. We can all agree that there was a lot of highly trained craftsmen that were needed to complete this. Yet we see nothing this precise anywhere else in India. How were they trained? How did they carve it with no electricity? Torches would suffocate workers if they didn't get silicosis. That's an incurable disease from inhaling rocks. Didn't seem like a concern. The only things we can compare it to are Nakshi Rostam, the Lycian rock tombs, Petra, and maybe a couple other sites like Kailasa. Kailasa was carved out of a single rock in traditional Indian style, decorated head to toe. This has no decoration and emphasizes the precision. The Rig Veda puts a heavy emphasis on sound. So what were they used for? The clues are in geometry. If you want more clues, check out the documentary this whole video is based on. It's on YouTube and narrated by the lovely Johanna James.
Bro, these things are like almost perfect years ago.
There's so much that points to that possibly being Atlantis.
Let's do it. To people who aren't aware, there's a location in the Western Sahara Desert of Mauritania called the Rishat structure. It's also commonly referred to as the Eye of the Sahara. It's a site that astronauts typically use to reference from space. And what's so spectacular about this is that it just so happens to match more than a dozen striking similarities to what Plato had described as the lost ancient capital city of Atlantis. Plato had described Atlantis as being the capital, which was said to be made up of concentric circles, 3 of water, 2 of land, which matches the Rishat structure. It also was said to have an opening to the sea at the south, and if you look at it from satellite imagery, you can clearly see that water had ran through it. And furthermore, it was said to have mountains to the north, and you just so happen to have mountains called the Atlas mountain chain, which Atlas was said to be the very first king of Atlantis. It's another striking similarity, but it goes further than that. Like, there's geological similarities, such as the fact that Atlantis was said to be made up of red, black, and white color stone, which is another similarity you see at the Rishat structure.
Yo, this is wild. This is wild.
Ancient Egypt and the Sahara Desert in general just doesn't make sense to me, because when you look at the Sahara Desert and the fact that it was green for 9,000 years, and then it stopped being green at precisely the time that we're told ancient Egypt emerged, that defies how civilization works. Why would a civilization only emerge after the climate got worse?
Right.
That doesn't make sense at all.
And so little research done in sub-Saharan Africa, where they've actually gone into the ground and done like large-scale research of these immense areas.
Nothing. The Sahara Desert is vast and obviously covered in sand and extremely hot, extremely difficult to survey, politically unstable, and there's basically been no archaeological work done across the whole, and the Sahara Desert is massive.
You could fit the United States in
You
there.
could fit anything in there, like a whole preceding civilization for 9,000 years leading up to ancient Egypt. Like, it's the perfect place. It's right by Mesopotamia. It's right by Egypt. And yet we have this blank spot for the 9,000 years before the development of civilization. We have this huge area which would have been perfect, full of rivers, lakes, grasslands, perfect climate, and it's just missing.
Did you know? Trick question, nobody knows, and that's the problem. This little guy is one of my favorite ancient mysteries that most people have never heard of. It was created by these cool looking dudes called the Picts, one of several indigenous groups of the Atlantic archipelago. And between the 6th and 8th century CE, they carved this thing everywhere. I mean everywhere. Like, constantly. They liked this thing so much that it's estimated that for the 400 years this symbol was in use, a whopping 40% of all of the animals carved were whatever the hell this is. Well, it's probably just an artistic interpretation of something, right? Well, almost certainly, but all the other Pictish animal carvings look like an animal, except for this one that has almost twice the amount of carvings as all of these combined. The Pictish beast has really weird features. It always has a long snout, this thing which could be antlers or a mane, and most strangely, these curled leg things. Since their other depictions are so accurate, many believe the Pictish beast to not be a real animal, but something supernatural. Theories ranging from it being a dragon, my personal favorite that it's an early depiction of a kelpie, legendary water horse of Scottish mythology. Now here's something really interesting. During the 6th century, the traditional way of life for the Picts was just beginning to be infringed upon by Christianity, and it's around then that this symbol first appears. For the next 400 years, you can actually watch the symbol change, beginning on stones displaying symbols rooted in traditional Pictish faith and culture, then being intertwined with a woven pattern heavily associated with Christianity in the region, and finally by around the 8th century disappearing altogether, placed along with the rest of much of traditional Pictish culture with Christian symbolism. It's hauntingly poetic to watch this little creature appear, for being literally filled with the symbols of the beliefs that would ultimately destroy it and the ancient cultures and traditions from which it came. Now all we have is this little guy. We don't know what he's called, and so we call him the Beast. Can't tell us what he's really called because he hasn't had a voice in hundreds of years. And so the Beast remains, his purpose and meaning long forgotten, an orphan of a culture and traditional way of life destroyed, just like so many others. If you also like interesting history like this, sauce me a follow so we don't lose each other. Share this with a friend to give a little love to the Pictish Beast.
Lost traditions.
The really old, I guess turn of the century, 1900s, photos of Chichen Itza. So it's like compared from then to now. Then it was completely covered with dirt.
Yes.
And plants all over it. Think about how long it took to cover that thing up with dirt. Look at that.
Wow. Really, this could be happening anywhere on the planet. We don't even know what's hidden underneath the ground.
Right. I think these things are probably in loads of different areas that we just don't even recognize. When you think about Earth cataclysm and how the Earth can change in floods and volcanic activity, these things will be covered up. A lot of people ask, well, if there were ancient civilizations beyond us, then where's the evidence? We would have broken shards of pottery, et cetera, et cetera. But the deal that this planet goes through on these big cataclysms that can be mapped through ice cores are catastrophic changes that happen in an extremely short period of time.
Right.
Where everything is obliterated and covered up. But some things aren't. And those things that aren't, I think, are pyramids and out of place parts and stuff like that. They still exist. People find them every once in a while, but for the most part, these things get wiped out, stuck on the bottom of the ocean, or just covered up in dirt.
That's very true.
The Mayans somehow constructed this in a way where if you clap in front of it, you hear what sounds like a laser coming back at you. At the top of this pyramid is a temple so sacred to the locals that no one is allowed up there, which begs the question of what Mayan secrets lay in that ancient room. Out of respect for the culture and all the people who hold this very sacred, we are not going to touch the temple. Instead, we're going to fly this drone up to see what's in that secret room.
Oh.
You cool with this?
Yeah, this cool.
Godspeed.
Oh, this about to be
crazy. Oh my gosh, this looks so majestic. I'm dying to know. All right, let's see what's in this room.
Wow.
Wait. Arthur, the room's empty.
Well, 500 years ago, the Spanish came here and they take a lot of the stuffs inside.
But before everything was sadly stolen, this is what historians believe the seventh wonder of the world looked like.
Came in and took all the stuff.
There's a city called Derinkuyu that's only one of over 100 underground cities. They just found it within the last 80 years. There was a guy in an apartment that was doing a project on his house in that part of Turkey, and he collapsed a wall and literally found an entrance to the largest underground city on Earth.
Oops.
What?
How did they build something like that?
These people knew that these events were so catastrophic they could wipe out their entire civilization. So they created the most elaborate group of underground cities in the world, creating air shafts, areas to even bring animals down, areas for sleeping, areas for schools. They carved the entire thing by hand. It could house over 20,000 people. At the entrance to this entire city, they have this massive multi-ton stone. They would roll in front of the door and seal the entire underground area for sometimes, you ready for this? Hundreds of years.
What in the world?
Honestly, when I first went to Egypt with John Anthony West, I thought before I got off the plane that this would be simple open and shut case. I would prove him wrong in the sense of his assertions that maybe the Sphinx was older. I had no doubt at the time that my colleagues in Egyptology must know what they're talking about, and all of that changed literally within 30, without exaggerating, 30 to 120 seconds of first seeing the Sphinx. Yeah, it really did.
What was your first impression?
Because my first impression of the Sphinx was, now that I saw it on the ground in person, there was something wrong with the Egyptological dating. Because when you look at the Sphinx, as a geologist with a geological eye, this was not weathered by wind and sand. This was not desert erosion and weathering that I saw on the Sphinx. And it's that core body and the walls of the enclosure that show these ancient weathering, precipitation, erosional features that are incompatible with the last 5,000 years of climatic history on the eastern edge of the Sahara.
He lost me with that last shit he was talking about.
So 97 years ago today, the man that the character Indiana Jones is based on, the real-life Indiana Jones, Percy Fawcett, mysteriously vanished deep into the Amazon jungle looking for the fabled lost city of Z. So back in the early 1900s, Percy Fawcett was recruited by the British royal government to do some extensive mapping, exploration, and cartography of the Amazon rainforest, and more specifically, the Amazon River. And during his initial expeditions, he made some archaeological discoveries that began some revelations in his life. First being that the remnants and relics that he found of an ancient lost civilization that he believed once thrived in the Amazon completely opened his eyes and his mind to the possibilities of what these primitive people may have been capable of at one time. And secondly, after his 2 decades of exploration in the Amazon and meeting countless Amazonians, he began to become rather disillusioned to the English aristocrats and the English elites, whose dispositions led them to extremely dogmatic and authoritarian views about the rest of the world. And more specifically, that the pre-World War British Empire was the absolute pinnacle of all of civilization. And certainly that they shared absolutely no likeness to the savages who lived in the jungles in South America. But Percy Fawcett over the years had been hearing rumors and tales from the native Amazonians of a utopian city hidden deep within a remote part of the Amazon, of which he nicknamed the city Zed, or Z for short. And so, having this deep-rooted sense that he did not belong with the aristocrats in Europe, he searched for decades for his lost city of Z, to which, by the contemporary academics, he was met with extreme scrutiny. Then, on May 29th, 1925, exactly 97 years ago today, Percy, his son Jack, and Jack's best friend made one final expedition to the Amazon, believing that they knew the location of the lost city of Z. He wrote one final letter to his wife saying that the expedition was going well and that the next morning they would be descending into the most remote part of the forest. And it's after this letter that Percy Fawcett and company mysteriously vanished forever into the most uncharted area of the Amazon. And in the coming years, over 100 explorers would either die or completely vanish in search for Percy Fawcett. And for over 100 years, it's been thought that this lost city or civilization was simply a myth made up by Fawcett. Until just a few days ago when stories emerged of an incredibly expansive and ancient lost civilization found deep within the Amazon containing platform and pyramidal structures. And all of this found in the precise area that Percy Fawcett predicted that his lost city of Z may reside. So after 120 years, Percy Fawcett has finally been validated. And nobody knows for sure what happened to Percy, but I choose to believe he found what he was looking for.
The real Indiana Jones.
The missing Roanoke colony mystery has just been solved after 400 years in 2025. In 1587, John White's Roanoke colony would disappear after he leaves to get supplies in England. But when he returned 3 years later, in 1590, the entire settlement was abandoned, leaving only Croatoan etched into a wooden post. Theories would range from mass starvations to native attacks, all the way to just simple abandonment, but there was no physical evidence ever found. But that was until now, as the Croatoan Archaeological Society ended up uncovering artifacts on neighboring Hatteras Island. The researchers would come across hammerscale, which are microscopic iron flakes from blacksmithing, and it was something that the Native American population didn't have at the time. They would also find cannonballs, gun parts, wine glasses, and all of them dated back to Roanoke's timeline. All of this sounds like pretty conclusive evidence to me, but as always, let me know what you think.
That was the view really for decades, that civilization began about 6,000 years ago. But then suddenly out of the blue, and we've got an episode on this in the series, comes Gobekli Tepe in Turkey, which is 11,600 years old. It's 5,000 years old than the supposed oldest megalithic structures, and it's an enormous megalithic structure, probably the biggest megalithic structure on Earth, because so much of it is still underground, although we know what's there because of ground-penetrating radar. Highly sophisticated, 20-ton pillars, beautiful astronomical alignments, deliberately buried by the people who created. They ran it for about 1,000 years, and then they deliberately buried it. And archaeology is still struggling to explain this. This is one of the mysteries of Gobekli Tepe, that the archaeology does show this quite clearly, that when the work began on Gobekli Tepe 11,600 years ago, the entire population there were hunter-gatherers. And how, in God's name, do a group of hunter-gatherers wake up one morning and create something like this enormous scale? And then the mystery deepens, because at the same time that they're building the megalithic site, they're also suddenly doing agriculture.
What? Wow.
2,500 years ago, an advanced civilization completely disappeared. But thanks to new archaeological discoveries, we now know what they look like. The Tartisian civilization flourished in the Iberian Peninsula for around 400 years, until one day they vanished into thin air. Just before they disappeared, the Tartesians held a massive banquet. This thing was lavish. There were riches and food and sacrifices. The remains of over 50 animals have been discovered, including horses, pigs, and bulls. We know the Tartesians did not want to be discovered. They stripped the adobe from the walls, burnt the place to the ground using torches, and then buried the whole thing in 4.2 meters of soil.
Wow.
I would say that counts as them not wanting to be found. Archaeologists have discovered many cool things, including pottery, but I know you want to see what they look like. Are you ready? This is so cool. Archaeologists found 2 reliefs of what they believe to be female figures, potentially even goddesses. I don't know about you, but I feel it looks very Near Eastern, and that is because the Tartesians were in very close contact with the Phoenicians, and they inhabited modern-day Lebanon. The Tartesians were incredibly advanced with metalworking and architecture, but also in language. This is the first script in the Iberian Peninsula, which again makes so much sense with their links and connections with the Near East. It's believed that the Tartesians worshipped some of the Phoenician gods, such as Melkart and Astarte. This is just a Phoenician bead that I added in because it was funny. Ancient sources tell us that, like the Phoenicians, the Tartisians were a seafaring people with rich port cities. This sheds light to their downfall because it's thought that an earthquake triggered a huge tsunami that washed away some of their cities.
Dang.
Not Atlantis. That's pseudo-archaeology. Unfortunately, as a seafaring people, they inhabited the coastline, which has changed with global warming and all that. And experts believe that 90% of their civilization is underwater. But with the advances in technology used for underwater archaeology, imagine what they're going to discover.
Wow. This stuff is fascinating.
Of all the things scientists have dug up from the ancient world, this is the one I wish I could make everyone aware of. If I had children, it's the one that I would take them to go see in person. This is the unfinished obelisk in Aswan, Egypt, and you can see the people on it. It's about 140 feet tall. It hasn't fallen on its side. It wasn't buried. It was unfinished, and this is how they used to make them. They would find a good patch of solid bedrock of granite and chisel that thing out by hand.
Whoa.
In order to free it from the rock, they would then have to cut holes into the bottom part, and they would slip wedges of wood under there and then soak them in water, and the expansion of the water would crack it free. And then they would have to lift this 2 million pound hunk of rock up and move it to its base, which they've also found a short distance away. As for why I would show this to my children or to anyone interested in the past, is this right here. At some point after months or probably years of working the site, and you can still see the marks from the workers' hand tools, they found a crack in it and had to abandon it. For any great works from a person, from a company, from a civilization, the part that you don't get to see and that you should see is all of this, all of the abandoned attempts, all of the wasted labor, all of the dashed hopes, all of the hours and hours in the hot sun, at the end of which you just had to turn around and walk away. 3,500 years later, it's still there.
That's crazy.
They found a 3,000-foot long stone wall off the coast of Germany. Why does that matter? Because it went under the water 8,500 years ago. So it's a lot older than that. And unfortunately, we thought that there were just hunter-gatherer nomadic people in that area in that time. But that's not the case. This rewrites history because these people obviously stayed a long time, long enough to build a wall this long. There was likely a real civilization living there before 10,000 years ago. Yeah, they also found a bridge off the coast of Spain that is from over 6,000 years ago, in a time that we thought they were nomadic, but it's very obvious they were not nomadic. They weren't. We didn't even know there were civilizations there, but they were just hidden by the sea. And we thought they were too dumb to do this at that time, but obviously they weren't. This is way older than the Egyptian pyramids. Yeah. These developed ancient civilizations we didn't know were there are just emerging from the ocean now. There's also a lost underwater city that was discovered in India. That's rewriting history as well. How old is that one? 9,500 years. And they found pottery too, which is cool. What we think of as history is only that of which is recorded. And there could be a lot of human history that we don't know anything about because the sea swallowed it up. Yeah, no one really knows anything, actually.
That's true.
Who were the early humans in North America?
The very first major community in North America is in the most unlikely place. It's in northern Louisiana. People think I'm crazy when I say this, but there is a pyramid in northern Louisiana, a big one, at a site called Poverty Point that is 3,500 years old, so it's the same age as the pyramids in Egypt. Biggest of the Mississippian cities is called Cahokia, and it was huge. It had a population of 20,000 people and pyramids all over the place, a huge palisade wall around it, a thriving metropolis. And we in America have kind of a collective amnesia. Like we never hear about these massive civilizations. Cahokia was the big first city, but then it spread from the Mississippi all the way to the Atlantic. There were hundreds and hundreds of these big cities that had, 5,000 to 10,000 people each.
Were they their own thing, or was there some kind of thread connecting all of them?
They had a unified religion and culture. They were, again, not an empire. So there were warring city-states. There were kind of territories that were owned by big kings, and then the cities around them were kind of the subsidiary lords and kings. It's so weird that we don't know this because it was clearly documented by the Spanish.
Something wild about Gobekli Tepe. How many of those pillars are still buried and not excavated yet? Almost 200?
It's like 5% of it's been excavated.
And they found it by accident in the 90s.
They did.
That's what's crazy. Wasn't it a sheep herder?
Yep. Yeah, it's a pot-bellied hill. He found something sticking out of the ground.
What's this? Let me kick the dirt away from this thing. And then, what the fuck?
Yeah,
then all of a sudden you find 12,000-year-old massive stone structures. That predate what we think of as history by 6,000 years.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it just finding more and more of it. And
Right. These people don't know what's for real. They don't know.
Interesting Lost Mysterious Locations Iceberg Part 6. So Babylon was an ancient city that was thought to be the first ever city to reach a population of over 200,000 people. It was founded more than 4,000 years ago and is located in modern-day Iraq on the lower Euphrates River in southern Mesopotamia. And it's known for building one of the 7 wonders of the world, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. It had layers of gardens going up of a huge variety of trees, shrubs, and vines, and was on a green mountain of mud bricks. This thing was huge. This is also the place where they believe the Old Testament story of the Tower of Babel happened, where, you know, they were trying to build the huge tower to reach heaven, and then God made them all speak different languages and they couldn't finish it. In modern day, after the 2003 invasion of Iraq, the US built a military base on the ruins of Babylon, which was said to cause major damage to the archaeological site, so enter your own conspiracy there. It's kind of weird, follow for more.
Of course, they would build that there.
There is no single reason why cities are built on top of each other. After the Great Fire of Rome in the 1st century, most of the city had to be rebuilt. But instead of clearing away the rubble, it was quicker and easier to simply flatten it out and build on top. This meant that new buildings were about a meter higher than the street. And so, to match the new height, the streets were raised and resurfaced, using rocks from the surrounding debris. With every fire and natural disaster that occurred, this process would repeat itself, raising the city and leaving old ruins buried underground. One of the clearest examples of this is the Basilica of San Clemente in Rome. The structure we see today is from the 12th century, but it was built directly on top of an old church from the 4th century. That church was built directly on top of a mysterious old temple. And that temple was built on top of an old house. And there are even older ruins beneath that. All in all, the valley in which San Clemente lies is now 18 meters higher than it was in the 1st century. Here's what happened. Back in 1st century Rome, before the Colosseum was built, a Roman villa sat at the bottom of the valley. After being damaged in a fire, it was converted into a temple by the Mithra people, a mysterious cult which was gaining popularity throughout Rome. But by the end of the 4th century, the temple was partially destroyed by the Christians. Looking to promote their religion, they decided to build a new basilica on top of the old temple. This basilica served the Christians for another 800 years, but by the 12th century, it fell into disrepair. After multiple fires and rebuilds around the basilica, the street level had risen considerably, and so instead of knocking it down, a new basilica was built on top. This is the one we see today. Eventually, the ruins beneath the basilica were filled in, and because no one kept track, all knowledge of the previous layers was completely lost. But in the 1800s, an archaeologist started digging and unearthed the old basilica with a staircase leading down to the 1st century temple. Inside was a Mithra shrine, and scrolled on the walls were paintings dedicated to the Mithra god.
Yo, that's crazy.
Ancient Egypt is so old that ancient Egypt had people who studied ancient Egypt. Bear with me. Well, because human beings aren't great at contextualizing time, ancient Egypt can feel like it's a big blur. Because, you know, you have the pyramids, the pharaohs, and the hieroglyphs, and these things are kind of mashed together in our heads almost like it's frozen in time. But Egyptian civilization lasted for over 3,000 years, and they paid a lot of attention to their history. So by the time of Cleopatra, for example, the Great Pyramid at Giza was already 2,500 years old. So the pyramids were already older to her than she is to us. So who was doing all of this studying? Well, the people doing this were mainly priests and scribes. They were highly trained administrators, literate elites who ran temples, kept records, and preserved religious knowledge. Literacy in Egypt was pretty rare, and scribes trained for years to copy text accurately. This is because mistakes weren't just viewed as errors, they were seen as potentially dangerous, because they believed maintaining memory was a sacred duty, and doing it incorrectly threatened the cosmic order they called Ma'at. So ritual correctness was believed to uphold Ma'at. A good example is around 1300 BC during the New Kingdom. So pharaohs like Seti I and Ramses II ordered king lists to be carved into temple walls. Famous Abydos king list records dozens of earlier rulers going back centuries. And to the untrained eye, it might look a lot like mere decoration, but it was actually historical record keeping. And sometimes they were restoring buildings that were already ancient to them. For instance, Ramses II repaired temples and monuments built hundreds of years before his reign, and in some cases his inscriptions sit alongside much older ones, almost like footnotes across time. But what historians call the late period, which is roughly 664 to 332 BC, this awareness becomes even clearer. Egypt had been conquered, fragmented, and ruled by foreigners at various points. Priests at places like Saqqara were copying religious texts that were already over 1,000 years old, trying to preserve what they believed was the correct ancient way of doing things. Egyptologist Jan Assmann talks about this a lot. Now, he points out that Egyptian culture was built around the idea that order, what they call, like I said earlier, Ma'at, depended on remembering and repeating the past correctly, and forgetting wasn't seen as progress but decay. They were actually quite worried about this. Late Egyptian texts complain about declining standards and lazy scribes and rituals being done incorrectly, which means even in ancient Egypt you had people saying, well, these kids these days don't respect anything. Perhaps it's why Egyptian civilization lasted as long as it did. They didn't just build the monuments, but they remembered why building them and preserving them was so important.
Right. I like that.
This place defies modern archaeology in every aspect. Everything we've been taught from history needs to be rewritten. If you look at this right here, the mountain is completely carved from the outside around the temple. 400,000 tons of rock removed and discarded somewhere that we've never even found, but they managed to carve out the entire mountain and build this magnificent temple. It is absolutely stunning. Every single design detail is very meticulous. They even have a water irrigation system that has been working for thousands of years. Think about the water irrigation system. If they didn't plan that perfectly and didn't carve it perfectly, the entire temple would be flooded by the monsoon rains. They have acoustics in here that when you go, it vibrates at certain frequencies that match concert halls in Paris.
Wow.
And people are saying that this place was built in 18 years with chisels and hammers. Think about that for a second. That would mean that 5 tons of rock needs to be removed every hour. Does that make any sense? With you talking about ancient people, just chisels and hammers removing 5 tons of rock, and we still don't know where it is? That is a 100-foot tall pillar that is carved from the same mountain. Imagine how complex that would be to be able to carve a 100-foot pillar. If you made one mistake, the whole thing would crack and fall down. And you know what this pillar means, right? This pillar in Hinduism is designed to connect the earth realm with the cosmic realm. So that's what the whole purpose of it is for. It's 100 feet tall. And they carved around the mountain to make this. One mistake, it's done. It's game over. The sculptures at the bottom of the rock, they have elephants carrying the temple from the bottom of the rock. How in the world did they manage to carve that way and actually reverse engineer the rock? How is that possible? Most modern archaeology, it goes from the bottom up, where they lay out the foundation and then they kind of work their way up. But this one, the top down, literally cut out. Make that make sense. That's way more work. If you actually think about it, that's way more work than building it than finding an empty space somewhere out there and being like, all right, cool, we got an empty space, we're gonna build it up, cool, that's manageable. But they said, you see that mountain over there? I'm gonna carve all the thing all across the whole thing and I'm gonna make this insane temple. And that's what they did.
That sounds crazy.
You see, this is exactly why I have trust issues with mainstream archaeology. Every single time we uncover something interesting that doesn't fit into the official academic timeline of history, it's either mocked and labeled a con, or they do this. So in 2011, Russian cave explorer Arthur Zhemyukov made a wild discovery in the region of North Caucasus in Russia. At the top of the Khor-Khora mountain range, he found something that revealed an unwritten chapter of human history. At first, it just seemed like a deep hole leading into a cave formation inside the mountain, so he decided to check it out himself. And as he went down this narrow vertical opening, he started to notice this wasn't any regular cave shaft. On his descent, he saw massive parallel stone blocks, polished flat and perfectly geometrically aligned with each other. We're talking straight edges, right angles, and intricately chiseled formations that indicated this definitely wasn't natural, it was engineered. Him and his team explored deeper and found out that this shaft was so much beyond our understanding than he ever thought. This is the Khor-Khora shaft, and I don't care what anyone says, someone, like an intelligent being, clearly made this. Inner passageways with perfectly straight, polished walls going down 40 meters into the mountain, leading into a larger chamber with 36-meter-high ceilings filled with enormous megalithic slabs fitted together and arranged in perfect alignment with each other, like they were intentionally placed there, with some blocks appearing to be up to 200 tons, and nothing can explain how anyone would have moved these stone megaliths into this narrow shaft. The total distance from the very top of the shaft down to the lowest part of the explored chamber was around 100 meters, about the height of a 25-story building. And there appeared to be more tunnels and chambers below that went even deeper into the mountain, which are still undiscovered. Clearly an artificial construction of a monumental scale, an absolute groundbreaking find by any means. And as per usual, absolutely no historic records of any structure like this documented anywhere in this region. The team even filmed their exploration for a Russian TV documentary, mapping out the shaft to reveal its true detailed architecture, with block arrangements that looked incredibly similar to the ones found in the Grand Gallery of the Great Pyramid of Khufu in Egypt. It also features several tunnels that don't seem to have been designed to be accessed by humans, just like we see in the Egyptian pyramids. No ladders, stairs, or any easily accessible means of traversing many of these passageways. Even small side tunnels that no human can fit through, and oddly enough, the team felt a constant draft of air blowing up into the chamber from deeper underground, suggesting this wasn't built for habitation, but rather some sort of other functional purpose, possibly a subterranean complex of another larger structure that used to exist on top of the mountain. Perhaps the entire mountain itself was an ancient megastructure, like a pyramid that's been heavily eroded over time. What if it was, dare I say it, an ancient energy power generator, part of a system of global power plants that produced energy for an ancient advanced civilization that lived here tens of thousands of years ago. Just like the Giza power plant theory suggests the pyramids of Egypt may have been. Whatever it is, it's clearly something that was built by an intelligent species, undocumented, in an absolute feat of ancient human engineering, or maybe even non-human engineering, just a theory. Above ground, the surrounding area has even more carefully sculpted stones all around it, with what appear to be machine marks all over them. Flat surfaces, straight cuts, and massive stone blocks stacked perfectly together, indicative of man-made production. But our cave explorer Arthur didn't find the shaft by accident. In fact, he was intentionally searching for it. Many ancient legends in the North Caucasus region about sprawling underground cities have been told and passed down for generations. And while researching old World War II documents written by those Germans, there was one particular topic that caught Arthur's attention: the Uninvestigated, a project initiated by top German commanders with the primary objective of restoring ancient occult practices and powers, who conducted operations around the world to find the most sought-after ancient relics and mystical sites that allegedly held power beyond our understanding. Expeditions for the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, the mythical underground city of Shambhala, uncovering the secrets of Antarctica. These guys were on a mission. When the Germans launched Operation Edelweiss to capture the oil-rich regions of the North Caucasus in Russia, the mountain ranges were one of the hot spots on their hit list, the assumed home of an ancient advanced civilization who left behind traces of their esoteric knowledge. Among this region was the Khor-Khora mountain, which they actually got really close to discovering the shaft themselves. And they even marked some of the surrounding stones with, you know, their trademark symbol. It was through studying these old wartime documents that Arthur finally located the site, assuming there to be many, many more structures and full-blown underground cities in this mountain range, which still remains largely unexplored. In 2015, Arthur claims to have made yet another groundbreaking discovery about the shaft and the surrounding region, insisting that he gathers more resources for his expedition ASAP. And literally, the next next day, he gets hit by a car and passes away.
What?
Yeah, for real, I can't make this shit up. Then Viktor Chernobrov, another explorer who accompanied Arthur in many of his explorations, dies of cancer 2 years later. Then 3 more team members involved in the expedition all abruptly pass away within that same time span. Was this just another huge coincidence, as I'm sure the debunkers are insisting it is, or did Arthur and his team find something that they weren't supposed to? Today, there isn't much information on the shaft or any explorations in the surrounding mountain range, with no new updates released about any of this for years and no plans in place to explore further, likely out of fear of having an accident if you do. If you genuinely think this is a natural formation and nothing suspicious is going on here, go get help.
Nah, that's crazy. Everybody passed?
The astonishing thing is the so-called Pinkerton world map, drawn I think in 1813, based on the latest exploration data at that time. And it just shows a hole where Antarctica is. Nobody had found it by then. But if you go back to the Orontius Phineas map, drawn in the 1500s, you find Antarctica is present. Now, what the fuck is it doing on a map drawn in the 1500s when nobody knew it existed in the 1500s? To me, the obvious answer is we are dealing with the fingerprints of a lost civilization that mapped the world and that left evidence of that mapping. We have evidence that somebody, unrecognized by archaeology, had the capacity to explore the world and to map the world during the last ice age.
That's a lot of things people don't know.
3 places in the world which are really lacking in the investigation right now. One of them is the Amazon, 5.5 million square kilometers, very little archaeology done. Another is the Sahara Desert. The Sahara Desert, tough place to work. I can understand why there's little archaeology done there, but the Sahara Desert was green during the Ice Age. It had a completely different climate regime. We should consider the possibility that missing parts of the human story are there. And then under the continental shelves, because sea level rose 400 feet. These are 3 domains that archaeology has largely not investigated. We see these signs of civilization appearing, and in places like Gobekli Tepe, those signs already include highly sophisticated knowledge. And that's why I feel we really need to investigate.
Investigate what?
So if you don't know already, there is a growing number of people who are starting to theorize that the timeline of human history as we know it, as we were taught in school, is maybe a little bit wrong. In fact, maybe a lot wrong. There are certain structures all over the world, specifically megalithic cut stone and certain artifacts that just don't fit the timeline, and they were clearly made with tools that we don't have any record of. Like this artifact, for example, it was found in a very early dynastic Egyptian grave, at like really early on in the dynastic Egyptians. Nothing like it has ever been found since. I'm not gonna lie, it looks like something out of a sci-fi movie. Now, once you know how to spot these sort of out-of-place artifacts and architecture, you can see it sprinkled all over the ancient world, and not just in one place. You can see it in South America, in the Middle East, in Japan, like ancient Japan. So I invite you to just suspend your disbelief for just a second. Just stay with me here. What if that there was a civilization that existed on planet Earth way before the civilizations that we have current records of? What if there was one way back in the distant past that disappeared, and the only thing left were these little remnants, these little artifacts, this sort of style of architecture, and they were, what's the word? Gifted? Borrowed? No, I've ruined it. Inherited, that's the word I'm looking for. What if these objects, or this style, this aesthetic, was inherited by very early ancient cultures that we know of, and basically that's where they got their inspiration? Are you with me? Now, what is very exciting is that I have inputted reference images of these sort of out of place artifacts into an AI bot, and I've asked it to show me potentially what this ancient civilization, this sort of missing ancient civilization, could have looked like. Do you want to see? Of course you do. So I put in this photo of the Assyrian in Egypt, which is debated to be a very, very, very old structure. And the architecture looks nothing like the typical, stereotypical Egyptian ornate, circular, columned temples. It just is very weird. It's a weird one. So anyway, I put it in, and this is what I got. It kind of brings to life the whole site. Then I put in a few of these like precision cut granite boxes that you find all over the world.
And I also put in ancient stone technology, and this is the image I got. And this kind of represents an amalgamation of all the weird stone carved precision cut stuff that we see. Are you starting to get the aesthetic yet? And this is my hypothetical queen from my hypothetical civilization. Can you see the vibe? I've made a whole bunch of these, so if you want to see more, then just let me know in the comments.
She's super excited.
So this guy Arthur Jumukov finds a cave system. It appears to have not been naturally made, by the way, in the North Caucasus Mountains, the Khor-Khora mountain peak. And then after discovering something, gets hit by a car the next day? What? Take a seat. So Jumukov was a speleologist. He studied and explored caves. Here's a map of it, okay? You need to see this before I show you the other pictures. So he starts exploring this cave system. Perfectly geometrical, parallel, polished stone slab. So after rappelling 130 feet, it opens up into this, which is 118 feet tall. There's even stones inside that look like columns. From the top to as far as they could go, 350 feet. For reference, that's next to a Soviet space rocket. Also, it needs to be noted that as far down as they could go, they could feel air coming up from the bottom, which fed into the theory that this could have been some sort of ventilation system. But for what? Now, apparently, according to the locals, there were ancient legends passed down for generations about underground cities and cave systems in the Caucasus Mountains. Now, he starts studying the cave with another guy who studies Russian anomalies named Chernobrov. Anyway, they noticed that the megalithic blocks are approximately the same size as the ones in the Pyramid of Khufu. So just like the ancient pyramids with the shafts, no one knows 100% what they were used for, their theory. So they start to come up with theories for this. Now keep in mind, they couldn't go any further than this, and there were little narrow passages that no one could fit into, that they would shine their flashlights in and it would go so far that the light couldn't even reach the end of them. Do you think it was some sort of ventilation system? Some people say that this looks like a resonator. 100% everyone that explored this agreed this was not nature made. These are like the blocks. They're perfectly cut, and this is unlike any other cave system in the world. And they all agree that there's no way that this was actually made for people to use. It had to have had some sort of technological purpose. What was this chamber for? Some people think that there could have been a pyramid above it that just somehow disappeared. Maybe it just hasn't been uncovered yet. You have to understand, this is a remote location in the mountain. So Jumukov started in 2011, and in 2015, he made some sort of discovery in the cave, and the very next day was hit by a car. Talk about a weird coincidence. It gets weirder. Chernobrov dies from cancer 2 years later. 3 other people that were associated with the cave studying also mysteriously died. No one knows if it's all just a crazy coincidence or if they were onto something. You know what, I'm just gonna stop talking there because TikTok will, do their thing. And then after that, hardly any research was done on it, period. But then in 2017, 2018, a guy by the name of Splashnov posted a whole bunch of pictures of him exploring the cave to vk.com, which is the equivalent of Facebook, but for Russia. You have to sign up for it to log in, and I'm about to sign up for a Russian Facebook. How do you guys think that this cave shaft system was created?
All right, guys, that was another TikTok compilation, man. Lost civilizations. You made it this far, you a real one for real. Make sure you put that in the comments, man. Some of this stuff, they don't know what the hell they don't know. They think they know, then they find something new, and then they just keep doing your own research, man. And science and history constantly changes throughout time, and we starting to see that. But hey, if you into this stuff, I got a TikTok playlist you can binge watch, but proceed with caution. Until next time, man, self-love and positivity. Fire Squad, I got you, and you know it.